Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dan Nessel Show. I'm your host, Dan Nessel. You know, a lot of times these days we've been talking about reinvention and starting new things. And today's guest is probably one of the leading experts in that particular area. And you could tell even by the name of her company, DoOver.me. Do Over Me. Is that the right way to say it, Cynthia? Do Over Me?
It's DoOver.me, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
That's the official name of the company. And it's not exactly a company in the traditional sense of the word. It's a not-for-profit. And that's an important distinction because part of the reason it was founded was to try to level the playing field and provide professional services to people that don't necessarily always have access to them.
And thank you for that clarification, because in this time, I think it's even more important to highlight companies or organizations like yours, Cynthia, where there's a lot of people out there who have run into a wall, who've been ejected, rejected, who have had to stop doing what they're doing for one reason or another, or who come to a point in their life where they're just like, I don't know what to do. They need to reinvent themselves. They need to change. They need a do-over. And it's I think it's very good that this is what you're focused on. And that's exactly what we want to kind of dig into. It's not just doing something over, it's doing it right, getting a second chance or a third chance or fourth chance with meaning in a meaningful way.
Right.
And how you help people do that. So I welcome you to the show, Cynthia Wade. It is a pleasure to have you here from the cold, dark depths of Chicago. It's good to see your bright face.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that.
Good. Well, so let's just kick off. I mean, I want to know about, how you got to this whole concept of the do-over, and your mission in creating this organization.
It began with my own personal do-over.
Mm-hmm.
In the summer of 2013, between the end of April and Labor Day, I had a major surgery which required 12 weeks of rehabilitation.
Whoa.
I turned 60 years old. My daughter, who at the time was, I don't know, around 20, invited a young man that she had met up in Minnesota to come down to Chicago and look for a job, which he did and he found with my help. But I also didn't realize it meant that he was going to move in with us. So while she was out in Colorado at Red Rocks at a concert with a girlfriend, I followed this young man to drop off his U-Haul trailer after I had helped him move everything up into her bedroom.
And this is after 12 weeks of recuperation from surgery?
Yeah, I was right at the end of it. My surgery was like the very end of April, and he moved in right around 4th of July.
Wow.
Yeah, and he had gotten a job, and that was fine. And I was very excited, and I knew he was going to ask her to move in with him, but he had to go through this training program at the job. So I thought, well, I'll invite him to come and live with us for a few months while he goes through the training program. That way I'll get to know him a little bit better and maybe have a little bit more of an influence on him when he goes to pick out an apartment, specifically in the area where he wanted to live, because I knew she was going to be invited to go and live with him. And that's exactly what happened. And so then after he got here and she got back from Colorado, we all started to move forward and we learned to live together. And it was fine. It worked out really well. And then in the end of July, I lost my job unexpectedly. I was working.
After all that.
Yeah, I was working as a recruiter virtually. And the boss said, let's plan to get together at 3:00 on Friday afternoon and have a meeting. And I said, sure enough, fine, no problem. Never once did it dawn on me that that was going to be when I was going to be given my walking papers. In spite of the fact that I knew that pretty much everybody else in the recruiting department had already left and that the company was really skating on thin ice. Mm-hmm. So when the boss called up and said, Cynthia, we need to talk. I need to let you go. I said, "Oh, well, what can I do to help you to get everything back settled up and it let you go?" Just kind of went right over the top of my head. And I thought he meant everybody except me. And I said,
Oh.
"Well, how can I help you? I know that this is a big, difficult, challenging time for the company. I've been there right beside you. We've worked this together for the past 18 months. How can we move forward?" And he said, "No, Cynthia." I said, "You too." And
Oh.
I cracked up. So he let me finish my deals, and I got my last paycheck, I think, sometime in August. And then
Mhm.
in September, over later Labor Day weekend, sure enough, he had finished the training program for the company that had hired him down here in Chicago. And she says, "Mom, he wants me to go apartment hunting with him. He wants me to move in with him." So so all of a sudden,
Mhm.
by that point they were moving out, which was a good thing. They ended up being married in September
Oh,
of
wonderful.
2019, and he's a fabulous, fabulous man. I love him to death. I'm glad she brought him into our life. But I looked around and I said, "Oh my gosh, what the hell just happened?" Everything I knew, in terms of my health, my age, my child, my lifestyle, my work, had completely gone up in smoke, and I didn't know what to make of it. So I did what most people would do, and that is I got out all of my usual methods of self soothing, which for me involve bottles of clear liquid and
Ooh.
pints of Ben and Jerry's chocolate peanut butter ice cream and a couch and lots of stupid sitcoms. And
Yeah.
after several weeks of that, I said, "This is really stupid. I need to figure out what to do."
Mhm.
And then I discovered this book by Barbara Bradley Haggerty. And I read this book, and it was called Life Reimagined: The Science, Art, and Opportunity of Midlife. And all of a sudden, I started to put the pieces together and I decided what I wanted to do. And I deliberately chose to start DoOver.me as a not for profit because, as I said, I wanted to be able to provide our services to anybody regardless of who they are and what their circumstances are,
Mhm.
so that they would have a chance to reinvent themselves when they needed to. And I deliberately chose to have it support people with both hard skills. We do
Mhm.
resumes and LinkedIn profiles, and we do interview prep and mock interviews, and we talk about networking. We do all the things. We can help you create a marketing plan. We can target market you to a specific audience. We can do all that. But that's the easy part, Dan.
Yeah.
The hard part is you. So
Mm.
we're about halfway through a workshop right now called You Are Enough, which is based on Brene Brown's work
Mhm.
around shame and resiliency. Because the reality is that when most people are transitioning, even sometimes when they're changing jobs by choice, they're ashamed. They're
Yeah.
they feel less than. They don't feel like they're enough. They're
Mhm.
starting all over and they don't know how to deal with everything. And that level of emotional impact, if you can't get a handle on that, it will negatively implode and affect your job search. So that's what we focus a lot of our time and attention on, in addition to the marketing stuff.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, it's interesting that you said you were talking about shame and resiliency because it's a topic that comes up quite a bit. Not necessarily shame, but the way that we perceive ourselves after we go through a big change of any kind, or when something, when we feel or perceive that we are victims of circumstance, or when the world around us changes and we don't know how to cope. There's any number of kind of triggers. Shame is I guess, a very natural kind of outcome of not being able to be where you need to be. I was just talking with somebody the other day who's talking about like the prerogatives for men and women, and the sort of mission, like internal mission that you're on, whether it be for men, for example, it, and it's a generalization. Clearly, women feel this way too, but generally speaking, men are taught from a very early age to protect and provide, and women to nurture and so on, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And when these big things happen in life, and you're not able to fulfill one of those core things, then it could send some people into a tailspin if you don't know how to cope. And shame is often the result of that, and sadly, some people go even further than that and, can't accept the shame and do terrible things, to make up that gap. Obviously, well, we don't need to go there, but the fact that you're giving folks the opportunity to explore that, and this just in almost, I hate to say lighthearted, but when you think about like what I need is a do over. Oh, it just sort of, from a messaging standpoint, the idea of the reinvention, the do over, is like manna from heaven for somebody who's feeling that way.
Yes, I agree with everything you said. The only thing I would change is that instead of saying some people, I would say most people find
Yeah,
themselves in that situation
yeah.
at many times in their lives.
Well, and I agree, and most people don't. Most people need a lot of help at those
Mhm.
times. I mean, it's very rare somebody like you, Cynthia, who had this big change, and you went through a few weeks or months of, you say, clear liquids and ice cream. I mean, some people do that for years and years and destroy themselves
Right.
and don't know when to stop. Whatever happens, some call it grace, some call it something else, but you get to that point where you're just like, okay, something, in your case, you read a book that just puts you, it happened to be the right book at the right time. It put you on the right path. Sadly, that doesn't happen for everybody, right? And I'd say that, wondering about this whole recent, year we've had, it looks like, and by the way, at the time of recording here, we're in February, middle of February of 2021. This episode will air in May. So, we've got a couple of months between now and then, and hopefully we'll see a big turnaround, even more so between now and then. But right at this moment in time, you know, yeah, there's some positive things going on in the news, about the COVID situation, but we're still in the lockdown. We're still in the process of this whole, like, being remote and being alone, and so many people have been disrupted during this time. And this is going to end up in a question, believe me, Cynthia. so,
I
but I,
trust you.
yeah, no, where I was going is, it during this time, especially in COVID, like, how has that borne on your approach, or certainly how has that affected the people coming to see you? Have you seen an increase? Has it changed the way that you approach things? I don't know. Let's make it open.
That's a really interesting question. And like many, it would have to be answered with it depends because
Sure.
situations are really different. Before COVID, when unemployment was the lowest it had been in 50 years, there were still over 7 million people unemployed. So we were even busy then. And then when COVID started happening and people started having their day to day work lives affected by COVID and what that meant, we got really busy.
Mm,
It gave people an opportunity to have a little bit more free time during their day and to look at the job that they were doing and spend some time and think about whether or not this is what they really wanted to do. I think it sort of forced what Eric Erickson talks about when he talks about the psychosocial development of an individual. And when he gets to stage 7 of 8, he talks about the difference between being somebody that is resilient and able to be generative in their approach to life and somebody that is stagnating because they
mm,
don't have any resiliency. And I think COVID sort of forced that a little bit in the sense that instead it was an outside stimulus that caused people to get to that point and say, what am I doing? What legacy am I leaving? Am I doing stuff that's making a difference in the world? And so we were really busy in the beginning.
mm,
However, I also think what happened is none of us were prepared for the perfect storm of events that happened in the fall with the political situation, with the unrest with the Black Lives Matter movement,
mm,
with continuing COVID, and now having to move inside and look at the holidays and spending them alone. And now here we are, like you said, in February, and people are just worn out.
yeah.
They're overwhelmed. And in many cases, they've resorted to survival mode.
Mm,
They don't have the emotional or cognitive or physical energy to do anything more than just survive. So, quite honestly, we've seen our numbers fall a little bit,
Sure.
when this would normally be a really busy time of the year, the new year, the new you,
Mhm.
all that kind of stuff. But having said that, once we get a handle on this COVID and the vaccines, by the way, I got my first vaccine on Saturday and I'm really
Oh,
excited.
congrats.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the
But that's okay.
advantages of being a senior citizen. The next thing that we as a
Mhm.
society have to do is focus on the economy and get people back to work again.
Yeah.
And we have been working this whole time in trying to shore up our internal capabilities as well as introduce new ideas with our members in order to be able to be in the best possible position to be able to help people to do that going forward. Because we know that there's going to be 10 million people or more that are going to need help in finding jobs. And at
Yeah.
this point, because of COVID, there's going to be less, in my opinion, there's going to be less settling for just a job and
Mm.
more intentionality around finding meaningful employment.
There it is again, meaning, purpose.
Mhm.
It won't go away, will it?
No, we are hardwired as human beings to find meaning in our lives.
Yeah, and it seems to happen later rather than sooner for so many people. I keep using these straw man, but in my case, I'm not saying that I wasn't looking for meaning or for purpose my whole adult life. I mean, I have been in one way, shape, or form, but to crystallize on it a little bit more, I mean, I find that it gets clearer and clearer as life goes on. And certainly once you have a family and you have kids, and there's a certain purpose that's baked into that. One would hope, anyway. For me, it is certainly to take care of them and to make sure that they have a better life than I do is sort of one of my ultimate goals of my being and the
Right,
legacy that I plan to leave
right.
behind. But with the folks who've been through the ringer this past year and been through COVID and now are kind of holding out for more purposeful roles, do you think that they're going to have the patience? I mean, once I keep thinking that it's going to be like a rubber band bouncing back. It's been stretched and stretched and stretched, and once the economy is sort of open for business, it's going to be a mad rush in some ways. Not in a day, but it'll be fast. People are going to try to get back to some sense of normalcy. Do you think that in that mad rush they may once again lose that sense of purpose?
Some will,
Yeah.
but I think more will hang on to it this time than in past situations. At least for a couple of generations, I think they will.
Mm,
But the other reality is that you've got to think about where people are in their life when they're going through this process of a career transition. When we talked
yeah.
about Eric Erickson and his stages, he saw that generativity versus stagnation change as happening between 40 and 65 years old. At that point in our society today, that's hard to do because that's usually when people have the most financial responsibilities because of those kids that you were talking about and the
Mhm.
mortgage and the car payments and the life insurance and college
Yeah.
and all that other kind of stuff. So for some people, it will be more difficult.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's really interesting, and I'd love to have Eric Erickson here to have a conversation, is that the young people, the people that are Gen Z and even Gen X and the millennials, even to some degree, the younger of the millennials, they already are starting to feel that need to be generative.
Mhm.
If you talk to young people, many, many, many of them are willing to live on ramen noodles for much longer than just the college years, just to be able to go to work to do what they want to do for the kind of company that they want to believe in, which is why companies with mission based companies, are
Yeah.
becoming increasingly more popular because so many of the young people won't go to work for a traditional behemoth anymore that doesn't care about values. It's going to pour the sludge into the river and get everybody sick with cancer, because it's going to
Absolutely.
run over. They won't do that anymore. So there's, a couple of different sides to that coin, but
Mhm.
the bottom line is that regardless of where you fall in that age progression and in that career progression, Do-Over.me is a group of individuals that put together a team that can support you through your whole career.
Yeah.
So whether you're a beginner just getting out of college and trying to decide the path that you're going to take, or whether you're 45 or 50 and got displaced by COVID and now need to look at different things, we've got the resources that we can bring to bear in your particular situation that are going to be what you need. And if we don't have them internally, we're well enough connected that we can find them.
Right. Just kind of thinking about this whole concept of generativity, that you've just been talking about, because it's not a word that I've heard, to be honest with you, very often. And I always think in terms of like creativity and, um, a creative imperative that people have. And, you know, in this last year, this is sort of what's happened with me, where, you know, the COVID hit, but thankfully I've been gainfully employed the entire time. So
Mhm.
I never had to worry about finding a new job or a new role out of any external motivator. Right. It's always whatever it would have come from me if it happened. And it did happen. We'll get into that. But during this year, that whole idea of the world has gone crazy, right? Society's bananas. And my job is okay. But now I have some time on my hands because I'm not traveling and I'm not working, 85 hours a week like I was. Maybe I'm down to whatever a certain amount. And it's, like I have some time and I need to, or maybe it's a better way to say, I get to use it wisely. And I saw that opportunity and I was helped by a few friendly voices and coaches here and there, but I was helped to realize that, it's not that I need to do this, I need to do that. It's that, you know, I want to, and I get to do it. I have this great chance to kind of shift the way I think about things and start to create something that I like and that's from me and that's nobody else can do or that nobody else does at least the way that I do it. And that's where the podcast was born, but a few other things as well. And I had a job the whole time to fall back on or to support me. So, I feel like I was cheating in some ways where, it wasn't like this whole necessity as a mother of invention thing. It was just, I really want to do this. I feel like it's the thing that I owe my children and my my legacy, but because it's the time is right. And so I go through this and I'm having a year of discovery. Really. I mean, I discovered you, Cynthia, among other people, but I mean, this is the great thing. I'm meeting these great people. I'm talking, having these great conversations, and other doors open, right? So you shift a little bit, and other doors start to open where you weren't necessarily thinking they were going to open before. And I was just telling you before we were talking about this just before we hit the button today. I actually just started my brand new job today. It is
I
February
know.
16th. So for my
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. And my listeners know that I bounce, I balance a few different things, but today and many of them will know that I started as to head up communications for another big Japanese company, but here in the States and more on the consumer side. But the thing is that, you know, I just I felt like I was open to it and it came to me. I worked for it. Don't get me wrong. It's a product of my career and where I need to be at this time. But it's like where I needed to be at this time was not necessarily where my last employer, and I really had a great time my last employer, but wasn't where they were taking me. And then this other opportunity became available to me, and I had to go for it. But the crazy thing is, like today, I was going through all that stuff you go through when you're a new employee. You know, you start the day off like, okay, like, and it's let's add to that this whole idea of we're remote now. So being remote, never having met anybody in this company in person, right,
Right.
is a completely new thing to me. But I've done some Zooms over the last couple of weeks, and I've met my team. So, and all the equipment was sent to me in pieces over the last week or so with instructions. It was all done so well. So when I switched on today, email just filled in. The messages started to pipe in. We use Workplace, the Facebook product, to communicate internally.
Right.
Ping, 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 ping all day long. And it was like, where do I go? What's going on? What's happening? And I absolutely loved this whole idea of being an absolute and utter beginner again. Right. I mean, getting to familiar with these tools and doing this stuff is one thing, but you get the forms that you got to fill out, and you have the people that you need to meet, and that's going to be ongoing for a while. But I really love this, and you were telling me that a lot of people have trouble with this whole idea of being a beginner again, and yet they have to be.
Yeah. Well, no, you don't have to be. You
Hmm.
chose to be. Other
Sure.
people can also choose to be, but other people choose not to be by completely avoiding it
Oh, right.
because the discomfort that they feel in becoming a beginner again is so palatable that they can't bear to go there. And that's one of the
Yeah.
reasons why people get stuck and do
Hmm.
the same job for years and years and years, even though it no longer has meaning to them.
Yeah. Is that a fear thing or?
Yeah. I think, what, when you come right down to it, when you do the reading for the people that talk about these kinds of things, choices and decisions are based in either fear and lack or love and abundance.
Mm.
And most people have a mindset that's closed and that is filled with fear and lack. And that's really sad to me because the world is such an amazingly abundant place filled with so much love that if they just were a little bit more brave, they could discover it for
Mm.
themselves. And that's part of what we try to do at doover.me. But let me go back and ask you a question. Can I turn the
Sure.
tables on you here for a minute?
Please do.
There was a lot that you said before you got to that question about and talked about the new job that you have.
Yeah.
There were a lot of threads in there, but here's what I want
Yeah.
to go to is what if in your case in particular and in others that are like you
Hmm.
that creativity is the seed of generativity,
Hmm.
that your need to find meaning in your life by being more creative, by venturing out onto this new platform in this new job, by doing the things that you want to do to satisfy the next engagement and growth part of your life was leading to what eventually will be generative in the sense that it's producing all along the way, building up as it goes, the products and the ideas and the concepts that are going to be uniquely the gifts that Dan Nessel gives to the world. And that, in fact, will leave your legacy.
I don't understand why you started that question with "what if," because because
Did you ever
that
think
was
of it like that?
really. I have not put it. I've certainly not thought of it in such a comprehensive and holistic way, and tying that to generativity. I've loosely thought that, and this is it's not directly because of it wasn't purposeful, but I've loosely thought that my quest for creativity and my stress on the whole idea of being a creator is what actually opened up these other doors for me, right? And that it's part of my whole picture. And in fact, when I was talking to my employer to get this, to in the process of figuring out, whether it was a good fit, I was very firm about my approach to creativity and that my podcast is a central part of it all.
Mhm.
And I thought that that was a risk. I thought that, what, if I'm going to say this is what I do, and I'm not going to pull back on the podcast, it's not something that I'm willing to do at this stage in my life. So that's part of me, right? So if somebody wants to employ me or wants me to join their family, so to speak, that's what they get.
Right.
And they were awesome about it from, top to, I mean, we had to sort out a couple things, just because, of course, they had to make sure I wasn't doing some crazy, like, you know, all like political like minefield of a podcast. So once that was cleared out the way, that wasn't what I was doing, the company's been just like, sure. Because why? Because they said that the focus that you have, or even the kinds of people that you're talking to and the kinds of connections you're making can do nothing but benefit everything.
Absolutely.
The information and the learning that I get today from you, Cynthia, where's it going? It's going to me. It's going to the world, to the people who listen to this, but it's also going to be funneled back into my approach to working with my teammates. And,
Exactly.
I'm going to be a better manager because of this.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, anyway, that's a long way of saying that. I was thinking in bits and pieces about that, this whole, you know, generativity, my creativity be leading to this generativity, as you put it. But I hadn't really thought of it in a big way. And the way you put it before is maybe a better frame up of my life at this moment than I've heard from anybody yet. And I'm lucky we're recording it because I can,
You
because now
can
I'm going
go
to write
back
it
and
down after
listen
we're done.
again. Well, so here's the
Great.
deal. I am a few years older than you, and I am in a position of no longer having that daughter or any other children at home. So I'm able to spend probably more time thinking about this kind of stuff than what you are right now in your life.
Mm,
So that's just a little peek for you as far as where you're going to go and what you're going to do. And I see nothing but fabulous things ahead of you. And
I thank you.
many more iterations and opportunities for you to be a beginner. And I just wish, part of my motive in doing this with you is getting it out there because
Mhm.
I would like other people to realize that while Dan Nessel is a very special and unique man, he's not the
Hmm.
only one out there that has, opportunities to give his gifts. And
What? Of course.
no, everybody's different. Everybody's got a different
Yeah.
set. Everybody's got their own wonderful life. But the bottom line is that if you pay enough attention to yourself, you can discover those strengths in you and they may
Mhm.
play out a little bit differently. But if you give them enough room and don't box them in, and give them really heavy expectations about what has to happen, they will play out. And even when they don't play
Mhm.
out exactly like you want them to, maybe
Yeah.
heaven forbid you might fail, like this job won't work out.
Mhm.
The bottom line is those are the best opportunities to learn because we don't spend
Mhm.
time analyzing our successes. We spend time analyzing our failures so that we
Mhm.
figure out how not to do it again. And so there's always that opportunity for you to get better and better and better. And I have no doubt
Yeah.
that what I know about you, you will.
I certainly appreciate the confidence. It's been a fortunate run for me, and it comes with a lot of wisdom, I guess some wisdom, but certainly a lot of experience before all this happened, and, various hardships and also good things that have happened in my life. It led me to this point, but and some good reading as well. You got to keep improving, filling up the noggin when it's
Right,
a little bit empty. I'm
right.
I'm due now. I have to start reading some more. But that's me, right? And I had the benefit, like I said, of having a full-time job and a supportive family, and just like, you know, the ability to go, what I think what I really need to do is I need to talk into a microphone and record it and send it out there and see what happens, tactically speaking. And you have anybody has the ability to do that if they have internet and they have, $100 or even less to get a microphone and just make it happen. What do you do about people though who are really, you know, in a really bad place? How do you bottle that and help them through their fear or through that, and to help them to help to convince them or help them to understand that their life, which seems like it's all about lack, actually should be all about abundance.
Well, isn't that the $1,000,000 question? And it's
Yeah.
one that do-over.me attempts to figure out on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And it's always a little bit different because one of the biggest rules is you got to meet people where they are, not where you
Mhm.
think they should be, but where they really are. And you got to accept them exactly as they are. And you share with them and you invite them to grow and you support them through the process and don't leave their side when they're going through the process. But the bottom line is that all you can do is invite them to the opportunities and they are the ones that have to take advantage of them. What we try to do at doover.me in meeting them where they are and in wondering where they want to go is to continue to accept them as they are and validate all of their feelings while at the same time providing gentle nudges for them to take a look at different things, things that they may not have ever been aware of in the past.
Yeah.
And sometimes we succeed and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we succeed in giving a person a new outlook, giving them that open mindset and that feeling of love and abundance, but not getting a job. Which, the reality is that it kind of, so what are we measuring here in terms of measuring and doover.me's successes? Yes, getting a job is part of it. But the reality is, I would rather have somebody come in and learn how to be positive and optimistic and grateful and live a life of love and abundance and know that it's not tied to whatever job they have than somebody
Yeah.
come in here and get the very best job on the next ladder of the rung of their path to success, but not have learned anything about love and abundance and acceptance. Because in my world, those are the former are the better people. And they're the ones that are really going to change the world. That guy who didn't learn anything but got the job, he'll be
Mhm.
back.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
that
we've all been there.
Yeah,
I
that
haven't.
person that learns something eventually is going to learn how to do it on their own because they're going to know that they're enough. Whatever they've got in whatever situation, they already have everything they need. They're enough. But that guy that got the great job right away and wasn't challenged by the rest of that stuff, he might not get that, or the gal. I shouldn't just say guy. The gal or the guy, and they'll be back because they won't have been able to figure it out again.
Yeah. It's important to, I think, to highlight that what you're doing here is a far more coaching approach to this whole thing than you're not a job placement service,
No,
right? So
no,
I just want to make sure that we're clear about that because the kind of improvement that you're trying to, or the kinds of change that you're trying to elicit in the people who come to do over.me has to be driven from within them.
right,
So you're trying to bring it out.
right,
And in the process, you help them to discover what it is about them or what they want to do and then
right.
point them in the right direction. And then the job stuff comes after that.
Right. And it's amazing to me how many people have absolutely no clue what makes them smile, what brings them joy, what their particular talents and strengths are. It's hard for me to imagine having gotten to this age and stage of my life and not having all that.
Mm,
But I guess it just depends on the path that you we're on, and realizing that not everybody has that. That's one of the ways when we meet them where they're at and talk to them about what they think they want and then start to introduce all these other possibilities. You can see the lights start to kindle in their eyes and get brighter and brighter because you're sharing with them things that in some cases they never even realized, they never knew. And so all of a
yeah.
sudden the world can look like a different kind of a place. And then when they start to actually see it play out and they start to see the successes that can be gained from it, they become believers.
You say believers because it's the word, what was just going through my head as you were talking about this is this idea that people need to grapple with their belief system to get to that, to make that mindset shift and get to where they need to be. And yet, what they're ending up coming out with is yet another set of beliefs about themselves. So it's that word belief is kind of funky in some ways. You're trying to find out what you believe and come to terms with that, and either understand that what you believe about yourself is either dangerous, wrong, misguided, misplaced, whatever, any number of things. Just the fact that it's just not right for you in many cases. And then, replace that in some ways with a system of thought that is much more focused on, going forward.
Right. Because you have to own your own story.
Yeah.
And the reality is, like with my daughter, and I know you have two teenage girls, right?
That's right.
So God bless you, Dan. You will survive. But the bottom line is that, as parents, we try to pour all of this stuff that we know into their heads. But the
Yeah.
reality is that we can't live their lives for them. We have to let them make their own mistakes. And these concepts of, at first it was helicopter parenting, and then it was lawnmower parenting, where you're putting everything of value in their path and clearing away all the debris from their path so that all they have to do is move straight through. That does not serve them, because the minute your lawnmower goes on the fritz and they have to try to make their way through the tall weeds because you're not out there in front of them for whatever reason, they're lost in many cases and they
Yeah.
don't know what to do. So you have to let them go through their own journey so that they own that story.
Yeah.
And many young adults now, especially, don't have that. And even some older adults, what happens with the older adults, I think, is they get caught up in the whole grind of, okay, I graduated from high school and now I'm going to go to college. And then I graduated from college and then I'm going to get married and then I'm going to get a job. And then we're going to have babies and then we're going to buy a house in the suburbs and have two dogs or two kids, a dog, and a station wagon, right? Along with a
Yeah.
house. And all of a sudden they wake up one day when they're 40 years old and say, yeah, but is that what I really wanted to do? Is that what I really am meant to do? Is that my wonderful life? And if it is, great. But I sometimes wonder if they ever spent any time at all thinking about any of those choices they made while they were making them, as opposed to just kind of letting them happen and going with the flow.
I'm reflecting on what I'm doing as a parent to destroy my children as I hear you speak. I mean, my wife and I are definitely not helicoptering and we're not lawn mowing, but I don't know what we are. I mean, I think we try our best and we do what we can. And, it is, in all fairness, only very recently that I've started to really look at my own belief systems and, all the nonsense that I might have inside my head in some ways, or that I had, and what I can offer, that's unique and that's good for the world. I really wasn't really focused on that for a long time, or at least not directly. And I wonder if I was doing a disservice for the kids by not being focused on that. And then I thought, well, you know what? We're humans. I mean, I'm not going to beat myself up about that, but what can I do now is the
Well, like
thing.
Maya
And
Angelou says, when you know better, you do better.
yeah, that's that's
And Brene Brown tells us that we can't give our children something that we don't ourselves have.
yeah. My daughter said to me today, this is I wonder if this is some wacky way of figuring out of kind of identifying a belief system or a character analysis of some kind. So she says that if I were going to be a criminal, what crime would I be committing? If I was ever arrested, what would the crime be? Like I think something like that. I'm like, well, that's a really odd question to ask your dad. And it was all, by the way, all in text, of course, because she only communicates
They
by
don't
her
talk
phone.
to you face to face.
Yeah. I found out the context of this whole thing later, but I was like, well, that's odd. And then I thought, okay, knowing her, she's a very, very thoughtful teenager, very, very smart intellectual. So she probably has something going on, like, or something about this. And I was thinking about it, I said, am I going to go with, you're likely to be arrested for conspiracy to commit fraud? Or is it, I gave it some serious thought because I figured that she might reverse engineer the crime that I gave her into some judgment about her character or personality, which is kind of true, you know? So, I eliminated, I said, I'm not going to, it's not going to be murder or theft or something simple than that. And I ended up with racketeering. I ended up with,
Right?
I ended up
What
with,
explanation did you offer to her for that?
because she's kind of a ringleader, she's kind of an organizer of people, and not necessarily. I'm not going to go so far as say manipulator, although she probably has that ability. She's an influencer, and
She has
you know
wooing
sh
her Clifton
she's.
Strengths.
I think she does. I'm not sure if she herself understands it, but I think she does. But she's she's sort of unobtrusive. She's not going to be like right out there in the middle of everything and saying, "Hey, look at me." So that's what I'm saying. She's like that dangerous guy sitting in the back of the restaurant with the by the table with the checkerboard tablecloth.
Hmm.
So that's what I ended up with her. And then I found out that what she was, it was because of a conversation she was having with her friends. Her friend said was like accused, like was saying to her all of her friend group, yeah, if you were arrested of a crime, it would be murder, it would be theft, it'd be whatever. So she wanted to double check and kind of you know check on what her get a gut check what her friend was saying to her. So I overcomplicated it, but
So let me ask
you
you,
know,
in that situation, did you take it a step further and talk to her about how the personality strength that is innate in her that would cause her to be convicted of racketeering what
that's
would
crazy.
could also be shifted in a positive direction, and all of the things that it could do to coalesce a group behind an idea and get people to perform at a high level in the cause of a common good.
I wish I could raise my hand and say, absolutely, I did, Cynthia. That's exactly what I did. But no,
That's where the teaching moments come in,
yeah,
and if you don't have that stuff right on the top of mind, you lose them. The other thing you can always do in that situation, like when the
yeah.
kid shows you their artwork when they're really little and they say,
Mm,
daddy, don't you love my painting? The worst thing to say, oh yeah, I can see how that's a picture of mommy in front of the house, when it's really some picture of a space alien,
mhm.
jetting off into the galaxies or something. So I think one of the best things to do in those situations is turn it around and ask them, well, that's an interesting question, honey. I'll have to think about that. What do you think is
Oh,
you would be arrested for? Or what do your friends think you would be
that's
arrested
exactly,
for?
that's
And get
exactly.
them to answer it so that you can sort of see the direction they're going.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I know her well enough, at least, right? Where I knew there was something behind it, but I said, by the time we talked about it, it was dinner. She is a junior in high school. She spends all of her time either focused on on homework and work, or talk to her friends now. But and been giving them a big break because of COVID. They're stuck in the house. It's just terrible for the kids, especially teenage and all kids, I think, but teenagers who don't have the same social access that they would have. So I don't like I don't see her as much, even though she's like probably 5 feet away from me as the crow flies because she's right through the wall behind me. But I if she's like, that's all I wanted to talk about right now, and I'm going back upstairs now to talk to my friends, I don't really stop her that much. Just let her get on with her day, as long as she's not angry.
Yeah, no,
Kind of
and
the
I'm not suggesting that you should, but
yeah.
I know from having had a teenager that they do provide lots of moments to come back to that stuff. So, when you see her
Yeah.
doing something that's racketeering in nature, you might remind her, see, there you go, honey, there's
There you
your
go.
racketeering coming out.
There's
But
that.
this time it's coming out for a good reason instead of
Exactly.
maybe a bad reason, and get her
Yeah.
to start to recognize that and own that about herself, because the more you can recognize and own your strengths, the strengths that are uniquely you, the better off you can find your place for where you fit in the world and be able to make the decisions when you are making shifts in your career, not just
Yeah.
do they want me, but do I want them?
Yeah.
Are they a good fit for me?
Yeah. There was one thing I definitely wanted to ask you about because you turned me on to Marcus Buckingham and the standout assessment.
Hmm.
And I know that you're very big on the Strengths Finder assessment and assessments in general. So before, when we were talking about how do we help people, or how do you help people when they first show up and they don't know they don't know how to cope with, or maybe they have the shame, or they're in a bad spot, or whatever. Where do you start? I mean, the assessment is probably the natural beginning of it all. But I just wanted to give a little bit of practical kind of you know some practical information that listeners can go away with and say, like, which how could they use these assessments? How could they assess themselves even, and try to figure out if what they should be kind of, or direction that they might want to look in.
Well, we have a complete list of assessments that we recommend that people do when
Okay.
they become a member of the tribe at doover.me. And all of them, except the Clifton Strengths, which used to be Gallup Strengths Finders but has been rebranded, are
Mhm.
free.
Mm.
So you don't necessarily have to pay money for these. You can do them online. And as I said, most of them are free. And not
Mhm.
only do you have an opportunity to do them online, but then they go through all their magic behind the scenes, analyzing your answers. And then they spit out a profile of
Mhm.
who you are based specifically on your answers. And that alone is valuable enough to get you an idea and get you going in the right direction.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's just tons of books. My favorite, one of my favorite places in the world is always the library because you
Mhm.
can get books and you can now look it up online. You don't even have to get a book necessarily. There's, articles and things online that you can look up and try to get more information. And then there's always coaching, either with a coach that specifically is involved in Marcus Buckingham's work and Standout 2.0,
Mhm.
or, going back to Clifton or Myers Briggs or conflict management, resiliency, whatever it is that you are testing yourself and assessing yourself on. There are a lot of influencers out there that can lead you through the steps of understanding exactly what that means.
Yeah.
And then you have to figure out how to put it together. And that's the hard part. That's the part where most people reach a cliff that they're not quite sure how to get beyond. Do I want to jump? No. Do I want to climb? No. What am I going to do here? And so that's where the coaching really does help, because
Yeah.
sometimes when you're so close to it, you can't see the options that are right there in front of you. But if someone else points them out to you and makes suggestions, then they're a lot easier to
Mhm.
understand and accept and move forward with.
Yeah. It's always a tricky thing which one you're gonna do. I mean, if you have time, you could do as many as you want, I
Right.
suppose, of the assessments, and I've done them at various times in my life, and, some of them they say aren't really supposed to change much, but I've had some changes. I guess when you go through an event or you go through a life-changing event, then it's natural that your assessments are gonna alter a bit, but of late, in the last year, because of everything that happened with COVID, I just thought, you know what, I'm going to get a handle on myself a little bit better. But I don't trust myself to do it. I'm going to look at these assessments, and that's when I spoke to you, and I did the standout, and I it just came out teacher creator. I mean, can you believe it's 30 questions. Guy asked 30 questions, and it's like your teacher creator. How does that happen? It's
No,
amazing to
it's
me.
not the question. It's like the plumber. It's not that he's working on the pipes. It's like he knows exactly which pipe to work on.
Yeah,
They know exactly what question to ask and how to form those questions in order to tease out the kinds of answers that they need in order to
yeah,
make the algorithms work so that they get the answers that they do.
yeah.
And the reality is that, people that do a lot of that, they start to see patterns emerging.
Hmm.
And more times than not, they may not be 100% correct in assessing you, but they're closer than not.
They're close.
Yeah, they're very.
Yeah, and I felt that. I mean, I saw a teacher creator. I thought, yeah, okay, of course, of course. I mean, that's what am I doing? I've got a microphone and I'm telling people things and I'm learning and I'm creating and this is what I'm trying to I'm coaching people and managing people. Yeah, this makes sense. And I did a disc and it came out something very similar where my profile was coach.
Mhm,
Like I have the coach profile for
mhm,
under on the disc as
mhm.
well. And I thought that, gosh, I wish I would have known this 10 years ago and so on. And now it's a matter of figuring out the best way to act on it. But, you look at these things and you can almost reverse engineer it into what you're doing now if you really try hard enough. But I don't think that's what they're made for. I feel like they're made for looking forward, not
Yeah, and
necessarily.
I
Yeah.
think that the advantage that we have, going back to Maya Angelou and when you know better, you do better, is that you wish you would have known about them earlier. So let's give them to your girls
Yes.
and see what
Yes.
they can get out of them.
Well, they like to do like the which Harry Potter house are you assessment,
Sure,
but then
sure,
but it's interesting that those little things that are popping up all the time on their Snapchat and their Insta, whatever,
right,
are preparing them for a life of assessments. It's going
right.
to happen, you know. And I think my daughter, the one who's the racketeer, she did she did MBTI, she did the Myers Briggs a while back. And I forget what her designation was, but it was spot on the money for her. She's
Yeah.
she's very serious about that kind of
That's
stuff.
what
But
the 3 that we always recommend people to take are Myers-Briggs because that's
mhm.
personality and it talks about who you are and how you interact with others in the world. And then we love the Clifton Strengths because that helps you to identify your innate natural strengths. And then one that is not talked about very frequently that we really like is the conflict resolution management style.
Oh,
And I don't know why most more people don't talk about that. I think it's super important because there's conflict in everything. And if you know what your conflict management style is, and if you get to the point where you can identify the conflict management styles of others, then you get to the point where you can start to actually meet and resolve conflict instead of like
mhm.
being married and having the same argument for the whole 50 years of your marriage, which some
Yeah.
couples do because their conflict management styles don't jive.
It's very helpful, certainly for somebody who's a little bit deferential and certainly conflict avoidant. Let's say I avoid conflict as quite often. I try to consciously do this maybe the second time this week. This is coming up, but I sometimes play the Seinfeld opposite George episode in my head. I don't know if you're a Seinfeld fan, Cynthia,
I'm not.
but but there's one episode where where George Costanza is one of the main characters. He's a loser essentially, and he just decides one day that he's just gonna like going with his instinct has just taken him to the worst place, to the wrong place in his life every time. So he's gonna do it. He's gonna do the opposite of whatever his instinct tells him to do.
Okay, that's a
And
start.
like yeah. So like he's in a movie theater he's on a date in movie theater, and there's some rowdy youngsters acting up, and his instinct is to like kind of quiet down and and kind of find a different theater. But instead he stands up and he yells at them, "Shut up! Shut your mouths!" And of course his date is like enthralled with him because of this. So like everything leads to something better. Anyway, point is that sometimes in a conflict resolution situation or I try to say okay, my gut is telling me to sort of quietly quiet down and just let this person get their way. But sometimes I tap into the opposite me and I say, okay, I'm not necessarily yell at the person, but you know let me not listen to my instinct right now and let me try to go in a different direction and see where that takes me. And sometimes it's good,
I think
not
the
always.
important lesson in that story, Dan, is that, in my opinion, people need to have the information to make an informed and intentional decision.
Mm,
And if you understand about the different styles of conflict resolution and what you're most comfortable with and what's a little bit out of your comfort range, and especially if you have the advantage of knowing the style of the person that you're having the conflict with, you can stop and you can intentionally choose your response. And that's what I think is so important. I'm not so much about, being judgmental or critical of what people choose as I
mhm,
am of being intentional and critical, or I mean, critical and judgmental about the fact that they take the time to
mm.
choose, to make their choice to be intentional, to not just react.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I guess the real point is to be mindful and not reactive,
Right,
just to think it through,
right. Yeah.
which again is something that has come better with as I get older, but still got to work on
Well,
it.
it goes back to what everybody's talking about. One of the buzzwords for 2020 and going into 2021 has got to be pivot. We've been
Yep,
talking about pivoting at Do-Over.me
pivot,
since
pivot.
the very beginning. In our world, it's pretty much the same thing, but it comes from a quote by Viktor Frankl, who is one of my very most famous
Mhm,
authors. And he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And in this book, I wrote it down because it's important. He says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. To me, that's the perfect example of a pivot. You
yeah.
stop after you have felt the stimulus. You let yourself be in that state of space where
That
he
space.
calls between the two, the space or the pivot. And then you survey the landscape, you think about all you know, and you make a conscious and intentional decision about how you're going to respond. I love it. I love it.
Is like it's almost perfect and perfectly describes what I certainly have been through this year, but taking a more methodical or intent based approach to these difficulties, these challenges that come up. Every time you pause, there's space. I mean, just the power of the pause there, the power of just stopping and taking it in and going, okay, whether you do it in a certain methodical way where you're doing a mindfulness sort of, oh, I'm going to check my consciousness now thing, or whether you're just like, take a breath, I'm going to look around, right? Whatever it is, that pause, I think is a learned skill. I try to employ it more and more. You know what I mean? It's very important.
I do know what you mean. And I think that you're
Mm.
absolutely right when you say it's a learned skill. And that means that well, none of us are born with it, but all of us have the ability to learn it. And all it takes
Yeah.
to learn it is practice.
Mhm.
Practice, 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 because the mind is a muscle, just like the rest of our body. And if we get it into the position where after we receive a stimulus, we know our brain knows that we have to take that pause in that space, then it'll get in the habit of doing that instead of
Yeah.
just automatically responding. Now, of course, there are situations in which people would say that you have to respond immediately. You can't,
Sure.
take time. But those in our world are getting fewer and farther between.
Yeah. And it's a balance, I think, also,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
of confidence. And was that Bella that I just heard?
It was.
Yeah. Bella.
She's Bella the do-over dog. Yeah. She got a do-over at the same time that I got my do-over. Because when I told you that
Oh, wow.
do-over story earlier,
Yeah.
when I started to come out from underneath all that, one of the first things I did was went out and adopted a dog, and what I got was Bella. And
You're
that's
so
why we
lucky.
call her Bella the do-over dog.
Well, we're dog people, and any dog people listening to this will understand exactly how meaningful that is. But sadly, we have to leave you and Bella. I think at that point, I got to tell you, Cynthia, this has been so much fun. I knew that we would get into it. I knew that I would come out of this feeling better than when I went into it, and I felt good going into it. So you've made my night, and I know that our listeners certainly got quite a bit of great information out of this. Folks, if you want to find out more about Cynthia Wade, just look her up on LinkedIn. And her name will be spelled properly in the episode title. Also, go to do-over.me, and you'll see everything about her organization, her NPO, and links to various activities and things that she's done, and absolutely amazing to look at it. I mean, she's been a TED speaker and has done quite a few other things that are just out there on the website. Please go take a look. I highly recommend it. Cynthia, did I miss anything? Is there any place else people
Well,
should go
you
look
missed
for you?
lots. I think we should do this at least once a month.
Okay.
I think there's plenty to talk about, don't you?
There's always
There
plenty to
were
talk
so many
about.
things that we had talked about talking about that we didn't get to talk about.
Always the case, which means that there's got to be a second. There's got to be another time.
Well, I'm excited about that. There's nothing I love more than a good discussion with somebody that's smart and interesting and interested.
Well, when I find that person, I'll send them your way.
In the meantime, maybe you could show up.
Meantime, I hope I'll do. It's great to talk to you, Cynthia. Thank you so much.
It's great to talk to you too. Thank you very much for having me, Dan.
If you enjoyed this episode of The Dan Nessel Show, please head on over to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or the podcast player of your choice to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And please don't forget to spread the word. Thanks for listening.